Welcome to Cloud and Clear, the podcast by SADA for innovative business leaders and technology enthusiasts, where we explore how Google Cloud is transforming the industry and what that means to you. Now here's your host, Tony Safoyan.
Evan Macmillan, CEO and co-founder of Gridspace.
Yes, that's me. Thanks for having me.
Welcome to Cloud and Clear, and welcome to my headquarters.
It's beautiful. It's a beautiful day here in North Hollywood.
Thank you. I know that you have a big part of your operation in LA, and this coincided with one of your visits down here, but it's great to have you finally to meet in person, face to face.
Yeah, we're really excited about LA. We're in the Arts District, up and coming area, just a little east of downtown.
Yeah.
Some really exciting companies are there. Spotify is moving in, Hyperloop Technologies.
Incredible. So we were just talking before we went in here just about some of the things you guys are doing. But before we get into Gridspace, the company, I always like to talk about Evan the man. So you've been doing Gridspace since I think 2013, but can you just tell us about your journey into just technology and engineering and all the major milestones that led you to start Gridspace?
Yeah, well, gosh, I got started pretty early. I mean, my parents were academics and involved in education, so I was kind of like a lab rat in some ways. One of my, I wouldn't call it a job, but one of my activities at home would be to QA software for the learning company, and they made games like Math Blaster, I think was one, and Reader Rabbit, and that was some of my first experiences was not only just sort of interacting with educational software, but starting to look at it through the lens of an end user and a contributor to the software development team. The QAing learning company games kicked off this long track of excitement about software. I mean, I was also born in Silicon Valley in the 80s, so it was a pretty special time. I think it was in the water, and although my family moved to Colorado when I started grade school, Silicon Valley was always in my blood, and that informed a lot of the choices I made during the middle school, high school days, and then after, and informed the decision to come back to Northern California and start to work on software projects.
And you went to Stanford?
Yes, undergrad, product designer.
Awesome. And so, what was right before Gridspace? So I think when founders decide to launch a company, I feel like that's not like an overnight decision. It's sort of a thing that builds up, right? You have these signals that you're getting and ideas are coming together, but then there's like the logistics of the planning to do it. Like, tell me about that crazy and exciting time. What it must have been for you to be like, this day we're launching Gridspace.
So my adventure before Gridspace was a payments company. Eric Schmidt was our largest investor, and the company, we had this big idea that in the future payments would be free and networks would monetize through value-added services. And we built this really exciting infrastructure that made it possible for local merchants to run their businesses more like an internet business. They could see what customers came back and sort of connect online activities, offline activities. And the company was eventually acquired by Groupon. And Groupon was my first real job. And Groupon had offices in Palo Alto and Chicago. And the offices couldn't be more different. The Palo Alto office ran the website and all the new sort of technology projects. And Chicago, that was the ops headquarters. People on the phones, talking to merchants, putting new Groupons on the website.
The sales team, all that whole thing was all Chicago.
And that was primarily driven by voice. So you had a really large, vibrant contact center, inside sales reps and customer service reps, talking to merchants, talking to customers. And
a lot of SMBs, right? So I can imagine the volume. Like, this is like boiler room style.
Oh, it was...
Totally, right?
It was a super large
like just
operation.
cubes and cubes of probably young people, like one of their first jobs.
And it was very exciting too, because these merchants, they never had an outlet like this before, to have all these people
way to draw
know
a bunch
about
of people.
their cupcake
totally.
store or floral arrangement.
That was way before Postmates and stuff too, by the way.
Totally.
Like, it was way before Postmates. Like, that's another way to create awareness around brick and mortar, like cool services and food. But Groupon was like, this massage parlor could get like 50 customers in one day. Like, what?
Yeah.
Right?
And then 5,000.
Yes.
That's when
we broke
things
some
got really
things.
crazy. But that was my first experience seeing a vibrant contact center where folks were on the lines with businesses day in, day out.
So you ended up working in Chicago?
I would go back and forth.
Oh, you go back and forth. So you'd see both sides.
And what was so exciting about Palo Alto is we had all these tools for sort of measuring the customer experience and connecting activities on our website to improvements to the merchant experience as well as the customer experience. And in Chicago, you would have these incredibly important conversations between merchants and Groupon and customers and Groupon, and the only connective tissue between those conversations and the business and all the other people in the business was the recollection or lightweight notes of
what did they say? What did they say?
Right.
Yeah.
And that was fascinating to me because this, our business was being moved by these conversations. Mm-hmm. How well these conversations went, that determined everything.
How do you even improve, right, over time? Like, forget, like, you'll track a sale because it'll go into the CRM and all that, but, like, if you're not making the sale, how do you make sense of all this data? How does it become useful?
I wanted to do something in voice, and that was a huge puzzle. And at the time, we didn't have the capabilities to do what I really wanted to do, which was go into those conversations and figure out what was going on, and at times made them go better or automate,
retrain, train better,
routine requests. Voice was totally off limits, and when I left Groupon, that led to the formation of Gridspace.
That's why I love these stories, these origin stories, because literally, like, you couldn't have been in a more influential environment that would guide you towards Gridspace, because you had the technology exposure, you knew what was like the best available, but you also had like the use case like right in front of you, and you were trying to solve something in-house, which probably didn't have the latitude or resources or whatever to do it. And so many great businesses are born that way. I just love that story.
Yeah. Well, as it turned out, it's not. As it turned out, it's really, really hard. So just because you recognize an opportunity that might, the technical insight doesn't necessarily translate into
execution,
an easy path forward.
Right.
And what we found was there were some really, really, really big challenges with, both understanding and automating voice interactions. It was really, really challenging. Yeah. We formed this partnership with SRI. SRI was the lab behind Nuance Communications and Siri, and they had been working on speech software since before I was born. Almost before when my parents were born.
Right.
And they love this idea of building a next generation enterprise speech company that took a little bit different approach than Nuance and Siri, that really focused on these short utterances and sort of making sense of what somebody was saying, and then quickly passing them off to a website
or a result,
another department, and taking a step back and using a more data-driven approach and looking at conversations between people. And they had some software at the time.
That seems like way harder.
It turned out to be very hard. So they had some software at the time. It was designed for this purpose, and we prototyped it with it, and it wasn't wasn't that great. So to put some numbers on it, the software could transcribe an hour conversation in 11 hours, running on some of the beefiest cloud machines that we could find, and it got 1 and 2 words wrong. So,
and this is what, 2013?
This was, in and around then, and that was.
It's not that long ago.
So that's how hard conversational speech processing is, and then we weren't even dealing with the challenges of actually connecting these outputs to a product, or ingesting those recordings or those streams in real time, all the things that we are contending with now today in GCP and the cloud infrastructure. So we invested heavily in building infrastructure for this specific problem, which was, first of all, just being able to handle conversational speech. We built models specifically for conversational speech, and then we solved the problems around the processing of conversational speech, both on the sort of natural language understanding side of things. Okay, so we have some text from a conversation.
Yeah.
That's not that useful to a business. What can we do to both visualize it and distill it in a way that a machine or another person can actually do something useful with it? And then also on the integration side, so finding ways to make it so that a business phone call could find its way into this infrastructure and have these processes run seamlessly. So that's where we've spent the last several years really perfecting that pipeline.
So 6 years, it means you're making great progress.
Yeah.
And I've seen some of the logos on your website recently. Can you talk about some of those customers and their specific use cases?
Yeah. So it's very exciting. In GCP cloud infrastructure, we run one of the biggest contact centers in the world. So USA, 25,000 agents, almost 100 million calls a year. These are massive contact centers that before Gridspace were essentially using Xerox machines for audio with their calls. And
that must be super gratifying for you, by the way, just as a founder.
Oh, it's super cool, and we pinch ourselves, but there's still a lot more we want to do.
Of course. And it's always like the double-edged sword, like, yay, oh my god, yay, so much work to do, right? It's like,
that was a big leap forward from where we were with the SRI folks, which was, gosh, like we can barely process a file in 11 hours. To and get anything out of it. To we're processing hundreds of thousands of calls a day.
I heard you want to do a demo.
Oh yeah, so let me set this demo up a little bit.
Yes.
So where we are in our journey with Gridspace, and maybe it helps to clarify what our core company is all about. So we're a speech company, and we help companies analyze and automate spoken conversations. And the analysis problems are massive at big contact centers, and that's where we started. And the kinds of things that you can do with our product, with Gridspace, so it's on a dime, see what's going on in your contact center. Are a bunch of people calling about a commercial they saw, or an outage, or has customer sentiment changed about a certain product? Those kinds of business questions were very, very difficult to answer before Gridspace Sift, when a team would literally have to go back into the call recordings, listen to them, and take sort of a tally of how many times they heard this. And by the time that team got back into the recordings, tallied up all the mentions, and turned it into some sort of sampling report for the management team, the customer had churned, the business had already missed the opportunity to do something about it. And our Act 1 was to bring the kind of capabilities that large e-commerce operators had for their websites to this arguably even more important nexus of customer engagement.
Right, because the online experiences have the benefit of everything is tracked. Every click, where the mouse is hovering over, all this stuff, right? Where does the user drop off? Are they in the cart? What's going on? But voice, we've never had that.
So when customers call their cable company or their bank and they wonder, unless they're calling USA where the experience is actually pretty good, they wonder why it's so bad. It's because
it really
there's no oversight or assistant for the agents. They're pretty much turning those bad interactions into files that collect dust in data centers.
That's why people hate calling anyone, right? Because they've been trained over the last couple of years generally to have it's a bad experience. It's not great. But you're changing that.
And so now the question is, where do we go from here? So we're building these tools that help the business sort of peer into their voice interactions and make them better. But I think it gets even more exciting when you start to push suggestions and guidance to agents and managers. So a perfect example of this is, I don't know if you've ever called a banker or your bank and you have a question about something, and the new sort of junior agent doesn't know how to answer your question. You asked a very specific question, don't know how to answer your question, and they said, "Thanks for your question. I understand the words you said, but I can't answer your question. Let me put you on hold and look up the answer."
It's like click. That's when I would generally hang up.
And that's an even more frustrating experience after you've been on hold for 30 minutes.
Going through some automated
you're on hold.
IVR. You're just pressing buttons and saying things. You finally got someone, and probably someone that's a generalist,
right?
Because the system didn't understand what you wanted to begin with,
right?
And of course they can't help you because you have a very specific question.
And what if we could help that agent out? Junior agent, new to the job, maybe doesn't know all the answers to everyone's questions. What if we could be that little birdie on their shoulder and say, "Hey, you know what? This person was one of 15,000 people that asked the same question today. Let me save you some time. Here's what we think the answer is. Of course, use your judgment whether or not you think that's the right answer. But you don't have to put this nice customer on hold. Here you go." And if you actually look at the anatomy of a call, that can be 15% of the call. It's just folks finding information for you. So we're really excited.
So you could serve that sort of in real time as the conversation's happening.
So that's our next. That's part one of our next act. And then if we go even further, so we're going from here's graphs, here's the big picture of what's going on to here are some situations where we know what's going on, and here's a little suggestion for you, Mr. Agent, or you, Ms. Manager. Any computer scientist or technologist, I've never met a technologist or computer scientist that's not excited about voice computing.
Yes.
But it's pretty interesting that suggestion to the agent and then the agent's decision to go with that suggestion or not enables our next step. And that's when the agent actually transfers you to a conversational agent, a machine agent that can handle your situation. So we've built our first conversational agents this year. It connects all of our work to date, our conversational speech understanding capabilities, as well as our new GTS service.
That seems like a lot of work. Are you able to share how much money you've raised?
So really fortunate. Haven't raised a ton of money, but we've raised really great money. So our investors include Bloomberg, Santander, Wells Fargo. We have some terrific folks on the board from Nuance, former Facebook employee, former COO of Facebook. And total money in is less than $10 million. So we've been able to do a lot.
That's what they call smart money, right?
Yeah, well, you did it yourself, right? I mean, it sounds like you found a way to build a pretty interesting business without. I mean, how did you think about it?
Are we flipping?
Well, you asked. I've raised less than 10. You've raised less than 1.
I guess you could consider the Microsoft divestiture. A funding event, but I think services and product are inherently different. And I've seen so many of our GCP customers are startups. And,
right.
There's the whole spectrum of how they handle their cap table and invest, raising strategy. To see that you've gotten 6 years in, with now a second set of like really groundbreaking technologies and the type of money that you raise, I think again another reason why what you're doing is super interesting and why you should be super proud.
Yeah.
As well.
Well, thanks. And going back to Silicon Valley in the '80s, I think things have changed a lot too. I mean, I think in the '80s you saw, in the early '90s you saw more technical insights brought to the table. Risk, capital was excited about certain technical insights. Everybody was, comfortable with the technical risks associated with it, but they knew there would be really interesting big markets on the other side.
Yeah.
And I think what you see now is more the opposite, where folks are coming to the table with market insights and taking some of the technical insights for granted, or sort of postponing the exploration of the technical components to make those markets come to life.
Totally.
You're just seeing sort of a different set of companies really driving the venture agenda.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is there's so much money on the sidelines. It needs to be deployed, right? Like, but before we digress so much, I have to see this demo.
Okay.
You've been promising it to me.
So this is Gridspace Grace. And
Grace,
and it builds on our work in contact center and starts to put all these pieces that I talked with you about just earlier together. So we'll give Grace a call, and she's going to handle card replacement engagement.
Okay,
and,
you're going to put it on speaker?
Yeah, we'll put it on speaker.
All right.
So we'll call this bank.
Card services, this is Grace. How can I help you today?
I lost my debit card.
Before I can help you with that, I'll have to authenticate you, okay?
Okay.
May I ask who I'm talking with first and last name, please?
Christopher Johnson.
All right, let me check that information you gave me.
Sounds okay.
Okay, Mr. Johnson, just looking you up. Just checking your name. Okay, I just checked that info you gave me. All right, thank you, Mr. Johnson. You are authenticated. Is this your classic account?
Yes, my classic account.
All right, wonderful. And would you like to change your PIN number?
No, thank you.
Mm-hmm. What was that?
Oh, don't change my PIN. Thanks, Grace. All right, thank you very much. So she'll go through and replace my card, and it's pretty magical when you take a step back and think about how those kinds of services can take minutes out of the contact center, can take monotony out of your frontline employee's day, and can also take mistakes out of the business as well.
And just improve customer experience.
Yeah.
It's such a, I wish, I'm a big user like Postmates and Lyft and DoorDash, sometimes there's problems, and I'm too lazy to call to solve them because I just don't want that experience. And that's bad, right, for those platforms, because they don't get the heuristics about CSAT and sentiment of their users.
Yeah.
What if they made it easy?
Yeah.
I would obviously call.
What if voice was
more?
What if voice was great? What if voice experiences were great? What if they were fast?
It was better than this, two-thumb thing, which I can't do when I'm driving, I can't do when I'm walking.
Right.
What if I could just do that?
And the cost to the business was in line with their other digital channels. Right now, voice is one of the most expensive channels for businesses to serve, and it's one of the most frustrating for customers. So this big push to digitize voice, in my mind, is a little bit misguided, because if you made voice great and it had the economics of these other channels, who wouldn't use it?
Now, very important question I'd like to ask all the tech companies that have chosen this platform of GCP.
Yeah.
Can you describe what led you to that decision? Why GCP? Did you start with that 6 years ago? Like, how did it all evolve?
So there's a lot of things that I think make GCP very special and a really important offering in the market right now. The TLDR is the networking piece of it, and I think Google really shines there. I mean, they have some of the best networking folks in the world making their service really fast, and when you get into these kinds of experiences that we want to be really seamless and fast in the future too.
Latency matters?
It will really matter.
Yeah.
So we've been really impressed with the networking. But beyond that, I think it's more straightforward cloud offering. And if you're looking, if you're a really technical company and you know what you want to do, the administration and sort of a lot of the DevOps activities are much more straightforward on GCP, and we've really sort of enjoyed the benefits of not having to click 10,000 times to take an action. And look, I mean, I think for us, a lot of the cloud decisions are market driven too.
Mm-hmm.
So we're looking at where the most sophisticated financial services companies are looking, and that's where we have to be too. If we're not there with the best, we're not going to be there with the rest later on. But that would be my sort of 3 points would be networking, ease of DevOps, and then just market forces.
I think that's a very succinct and pointed list. But did you start on GCP like 6 years ago?
And I think the exciting thing about 2019 in cloud is the leading cloud companies are excellent companies. I don't think we've ever seen companies this size executing,
innovate, push the market forward.
Coordinating with customers. I mean, we have pretty interesting phone calls with product teams at all these companies, and the kinds of conversations that we were having with these companies, I mean, I don't think that happened.
That's true.
Even a year ago.
Because
they're really bringing the best out of each other. So if we look at 2019, and I'm saying, okay, well, GKE is better than the alternatives from Microsoft and Amazon. 2020, could be different.
Yeah.
So they're really bringing the best out of each other.
I totally agree. I think they wouldn't be where they are if there wasn't a competitive element. It's always been great for us, like as customers and partners, we win. But the other part is just the economic model is different. They need you to be successful. Because if you're successful, you're going to consume a lot more cloud. So you're going to get a disproportionate amount of love and support than the old enterprise software paradigm, which is like you buy it in advance, good luck.
Yeah, and I think this is the next part that we'll have to get figured out, right? Because you look at what's happening in Silicon Valley, and successful companies are kind of falling into one of two categories. There are sort of high compute successful companies, and there are relatively low compute successful companies. Lots of commerce concepts don't require a lot of GCP.
Right.
You can sell a lot of razors without a lot of computers. But some of the most exciting and compelling new businesses require a lot of cloud services.
That's right.
And I think the question for the clouds will be, how do you invest in these new entrants' success, especially ones that are building applications that the clouds will never sort of completely build for themselves.
Right. Yeah.
So that's something that will be really interesting to see how that plays out. Because I think to build the best cloud product and ultimately establish the best sort of business relationship with their application partners will flourish. And I think that I think Google is pretty open-minded about it, and they want to figure both of those things out.
I think Thomas Kurian and Rob Enslin are very focused on that. Not just with you guys, but with like all of them that play a significant role in the market, because they, again, it's in this new paradigm, they need you to be successful as part of the
and they need
growth in their businesses.
They need, they want these folks to last, right? I mean, they can't make their clouds successful if
They can
every
people on.
startup
Yeah.
that uses a cloud is a flash in the pan, right? Like, so
Yes.
they will begin to really sort of find ways to work with more bread and butter, merchants or brick and mortar merchants, folks that aren't necessarily building applications, in the valley, and I think they'll find ways to sort of deepen their alignment with business application providers.
Marketplace and other things we're doing.
Right.
No, I think that's super interesting. Again, the reason we have this podcast is I think Cloud and Clear is telling stories that aren't told very often, and there's just so much happening, and we're all really busy. But the fact that you would take time to do this, I really appreciate it. And I think we have a role as SADA now in the ecosystem to tell these stories.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a whole bunch of startups and enterprises that are on the cusp of making these decisions.
Yeah.
And it's great to have kind of the narrative of people who've done it, who've paved the way.
Right.
Because you guys have been, hitting this sort of technical challenge at the edge for 6 years.
Yeah.
And now I think finally cloud computing is caught up with your ambitions with regards to the level of compute required to achieve what you guys are achieving.
And we're excited not just about what we are doing in GCP cloud infrastructure, but who we're bringing to cloud infrastructure. Because at the end of the day, applications bring enterprises to the cloud.
True.
Enterprises are looking for complete solutions. They find value in individual applications. Those applications bring new workloads to cloud infrastructure, and then once those workloads are in cloud infrastructure and things are working and folks are seeing new use cases get unlocked and they're seeing the ROI, more workloads follow.
Yeah.
And I think we're doing a great job of helping folks make that transition in voice. Voice is uniquely challenging, but it's not surprising to me that other workloads are following the workloads that we're bringing into cloud infrastructure.
So I've never asked this question before because it's sort of a unique situation. But I'm so glad you're here. But the value of partners like SADA in this ecosystem, in this massive, not only just migration to the cloud, but the application of what's possible in the cloud to both traditional and new age businesses. Our entire business model is to create a value proposition that makes sense for those customers who are making this journey. And obviously, GCP is growing really fast, the cloud market's growing really fast, so some of these things are being defined. Like, we're defining these value propositions that are new because the products themselves are so new, and what's possible to do with them is also new. And it's great to be in this position because we like to be in market-defining positions.
Yeah.
And we have lots of GCP customers, we have lots of GCP customers, etc. But I've never talked to a customer on record that you started with us, like contractually consuming GCP through our resell framework and getting some level of services as a result. And then at some point decided to go direct back to Google, right? And had a mix of reasons. And, the reason we're talking is actually you connected back up with me and said, hey, remember me? Like, let's talk again. Maybe we should re-engage. And I know that, we haven't made any decisions together yet about how we're going to do that. But what led to you kind of circling back and wanting to maybe work with a partner again?
So I think it is take a few steps back.
Yeah.
I mean, I think our businesses have both changed a lot, and for the better. And I think that's going to make it possible to find some pretty interesting ways to work together. The specific change in Gridspace, we started out with really big deals with really, really big FI, financial institutions. And we were bringing massive workloads to GCP. We're still doing that. We have a really interesting direct business. And our customers had to be very, very comfortable with all the people at the table. And
who has access to the environment, all this stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So as that business has evolved, we've done a pretty interesting job of setting up these private clouds for some really, really big customers. and those are going really well. But at the same time, our business is changing, and the kinds of organizations that are coming to us and trying to make use of our capabilities, some of those businesses are smaller. Maybe it's a 500-seat contact center or a 2,000-seat contact center. And what we're seeing is the services and the support and the challenges associated with those businesses are just very different.
Yeah.
And just as we are beginning to sort of make our infrastructure applicable and robust for the really big guys, we want to be able to meet all the sort of unique service requirements of some of the slightly smaller guys. So from a technology standpoint, from a security standpoint, they'll be consuming the same Gridspace SIFT. But from a support experience, from a contractual sort of point of view, the experience will be different. It'll be more like a lot of your base.
Yeah.
So I think what's really interesting to me is as folks move their workloads to cloud, especially in this call them SMB segment, folks that historically would be buying phone service with a credit card or Zendesk with this or that with a credit card. I think folks like you will be their rent-a-CIOs, and that's an amazing sort of opportunity. And those rent-a-CIOs will be sort of natural partners of Gridspace, because we're not going to be able to provide rent-a-CIOs to every single customer at that size. And we're going to do everything we possibly can to make our product as robust and easy to use for that market segment. But there will just naturally be things that will be configured by folks like you.
No,
I think there is
very interesting angle.
I think there's going to be way more of that, and it's a huge opportunity for Google because we're now driving consumption at both the high end as well as in the mid-market, and it's a huge opportunity for other types of Gridspace partners to drive consumption without necessarily making 100 different business applications relevant to the mid-market. I think the question that we have to both ask Google is how can we do this together, and how can we get more Google support to go do it? This
is precisely the thing that I'm talking about. Like, these models and partnership frameworks just didn't exist before.
Yeah.
But you are a partner to Google as much as you are a customer, right?
Yeah, it's a fascinating relationship. I mean, in the demo I showed you, Google, also announced Duplex too at the same time.
Yeah.
So, we're spending more money with Google than we are on engineering and sales and product today. That's unheard of, right?
Unheard of, yeah.
So, we're a huge customer of Google. We benefit, immensely from their infrastructure. At the same time, they have a lot going on, and I think this is where some coordination among the partners and the big guys will go a long way.
Look, we're both dancing with elephants to some extent, right? But I just feel like there's so much opportunity, and I think it's the agility that's going to differentiate the ones who continue to last and be relevant.
Right.
How quickly can you pivot? The things that got you here, got us here, how can we make sure we don't lose that as we get, larger and potentially more distracted as we're trying to do more things? I think it's very important to deliberately say no to a lot of stuff.
Yep.
So you can focus on the few key areas. But we're totally game to work on some business models that bring us, you guys, and Google together.
Yep.
The story you're telling me about how you started with really big and then went scale is precisely what I see.
We're doing both. And I think what's exciting
is... you proved it with the big ones.
Yeah.
And now you're going volume.
Totally.
Which is exactly what MadHive did in my conversation with them recently. 4 huge customers, prove the model, and now they're going to go get a bunch more.
Right, and in voice, the only thing slowing us down was the sort of network integration. So, who better to work with on network integrations than the folks with hands on the ground? So we're doing it in software. We announced a big deal with Twilio. So if you're a Twilio customer now, you can add a little bit of Twiml to your Twilio application, or turn it on in Flex. and begin to use Gridspace, and I can't imagine that there won't be more sort of usage sort of on the back of the simpler integrations next year than there has ever been. And then, you guys will be there for some of those really, really big guys too.
We're super happy to be on this journey with you guys and with Google. Thank you so much for visiting me.
Thank you.
I always love that. Thank you so much, Evan. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, good meeting you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Cloud and Clear. Check the show notes for links to this week's topics. And don't forget to connect with us on Twitter @Cloud and Clear and our website, SADA.com. Be sure to rate and review the show on your favorite podcast app.